Now, without further ado, we have this week our guest speaker, our global guest speaker with us this week. I'm really excited, and there's a little bit of background because I met up with Tanya Irani February, I think it was,
Yeah, yeah,
maybe
end of
March.
February, beginning of March, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
at Indoor AgCon. There was no one from Star Trek signing autographs, kind of a thing. Not that kind of a con. So, Mr. Crandall, I'm sure you're disappointed in my inability to get Hollywood geekdom kind of signatures and autographs there. But anyway, it was all things indoor AgCon, all things technology with controlled environmental agriculture in Las Vegas, and I had an opportunity to spend some time with Tanya, and we got to speaking. She is the CEO, and I hope your job title hasn't changed since I typed this
Yeah.
all up. She's the CEO at Healthy Hydroponics Innotech Inc. in Waterloo, Ontario. That's in Canada. So all the way from Canada, everyone welcome Tanya, everyone. Yay.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Darin.
You're welcome. I know I gave a little bit of an intro, but would you tell us a little bit about Healthy Hydroponics Innotech? What do you do
Yeah.
as a CEO? And maybe even about we have one question already from a student that I think is applicable or an appropriate to start off with. Tell us a little bit of your journey from data and
Yeah.
technology and biotech to your current role.
Yeah. Well, I'll start off with a brief history about the company. So, Healthy Hydroponics was started off as a project that was funded by the government back in 2020. So, the federal government and the Ontario government came together and asked us to identify the baseline microbiome of hydroponic farms. Now, the reason that they wanted to do this is because, there's a lot of research that's been done in soil microbiomes and seeing, what microbes are there, what pathogens might be there, what beneficials, but there's nothing done in the sense of hydroponic farms. And for the most part, hydroponic farms are very sterile, so they try to keep as minimal of a microbiome as possible. So we were the first ones to do that research. From there, we then developed our database for pathogens, which unveiled the service of our Pathogen Plus and our Pathogen Mini, essentially, which is just disease detection for hydroponic growers. So we commercialized this project that we had started with just government funding. So the company itself was incorporated in 2022, and we're now working with more than 35 different farms in Canada and the US in terms of disease detection. And we're continually improving our service and looking forward to what's next in the area. I joined the company in 2022. I had just finished my master's in bioinformatics. So my research work focused on identifying pathogens using new bioinformatic techniques. So it was very relevant to what was happening at Healthy Hydroponics at the time, where they had just done the original data collection and then they built the database. Now they need people to actually create the reports. So that's when I joined on as a bioinformatician. And then, so as a bioinformatician, I was essentially taking the data that gets spit out from the sequencer and then creating these reports. And from there, my role really evolved because of the amount of time that I was spending just talking with the growers and understanding what their needs are, understanding what we can do to really kind of fit their needs. Because when we started off, I think this was a big thing that really helped evolve my role was that we were just doing paper reports and talking with the growers. I understood that their main needs were really they needed a tracking system. So I helped with the development of our online portal and then also helped with understanding that the growers also need quicker turnaround time. So implementing those techniques into the lab, making sure things get sped up. So at that point, they just needed someone to kind of take charge in terms of what are the goals for the company, what is the future. And that's really what a CEO does. It's really about setting kind of the plan for the future. What is it going to look like? What direction should we head? And because of my experience that I had gained over the 2 years working as a bioinformatician, I came into this role actually in 2023. So I started in 2021 before the company incorporated. So it was 2 years I was working as a bioinformatician, but then again, the role evolved because I understood what the needs were of the grower. And from there, I was able to come up with a future plan and vision for healthy hydroponics. And that's why I took over as CEO. So that's a little bit of a background on where I started out from, and then how it essentially led to the role that I'm in today.
Well, I have to admit, I meet with a lot of executives, and I often find that the people with the decision-making power and the purchase power, especially around technology and data collection and anything related to data security and analytics, are usually not people who have a background in
And
anything related to that field. You know, they may have a business
yeah,
degree, or weird degrees. Like, I have a degree in opera, and now I'm the CEO of this company. It's like, okay, I don't know how that degree in opera, you know, resulted in you being in charge of a tech
played a
company.
role. Yeah.
But do you find that your background in STEM, data collection, technology has impacted your role as a leader?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it helps me understand more so like what's feasible as well. I think in terms of the future and what things we can actually achieve, and then setting timelines for that, because that's really important for a CEO to do, is to be able to set timelines to certain projects or to the outlook of the company as a whole. And because I understand the data collection side, because I understand the technology behind everything that we do, I think that helps create a more like realistic vision for the future, rather than just, you know, I think that we can do this, and then it goes to R&D or it goes to another team, the scientific team, and they're like, this is impossible, there's no way we can do this, right? So it kind of takes that extra step of I already know what to expect. I understand the technology and we can make better predictions for the future and how we can move forward. So I think it's great. And I mean, if anyone's ever interested in doing something like that or starting their own tech startup, I think it's great. You'll talk to um, a lot of leaders in the industry as well, and you will find that it is always great to have like a technical background, and you can learn the business side after. I don't think that the business side is as challenging to pick up as the technical side, and the technical side of it really um, helps in your role as well.
Well, I have to admit, if I could have taken this class with me to the event in Las Vegas, they would see that, you know, when you think about like um, hydroponics, farming in general, you don't think high tech. There was a lot of
Yeah,
tech there.
there's
Why do you
yeah.
think that there is this new kind of partnership between agriculture, indoor ag, hydroponics, and technology?
That's a really good question. Well, I think one thing for sure is if we're taking a look at the way that things were grown traditionally, so we're talking about outdoor agriculture, um, there's not a lot of technology that was involved in outdoor agriculture, but things are now changing in terms of climate. Climate change has become a huge issue, and we have to be able to adapt in a sense to the changes that Mother Nature is throwing at us, essentially. And indoor ag is one of those aspects where we can adapt. Indoor agriculture, though, from the get-go, when you build a greenhouse, and especially if you're building it in climates that are very variable, so places like Canada and the US, you already have to have automation in terms of how are you going to control that climate and make sure that there is food production year round. So I think that it's really more so there has to be an adaptation of technology for us to meet the demands of like our growing population. And to ensure that there is like food security as well, worldwide. And that technology is really going to help get us there. So you'll see now in greenhouses, you're actually able to grow year round. If you take a look 20 years ago, that was impossible. People were only growing in the summer months, even under like a greenhouse, because um, they were relying so much on just the sunlight, right? So, and you don't get that in the winter. You get cold winters as well, right? So it was impossible. But now you look at it and you'll have 12, like full 12 months, greenhouses will be growing. And the only reason is because of the adoption of technology. And again, the reason that we have to be able to adapt that, like technology is because we have a growing population. There is food security, there is climate change. There's so many different factors affecting food security. So it's not more so a reason why is it there. It's just it has to be, right? Yeah.
So if we look at climate change, sustainability, access to food as challenges, and then we look
Yeah.
at the opportunity in terms of using technology, now we have to address the fact that there are certain threats in terms of if you're going to collect data, right?
Yeah.
Now you have to deal with the security of data. And, technically a cyber attack, well, whether you're talking about a data breach that could impact perhaps clients' information particular
Yeah.
to products and to consumers. But even the idea of a cyber attack that maybe someone comes in and I know this sounds facetious, but these aren't. The idea of someone coming in and purposely altering chemicals that go into the irrigation water and can destroy or can even contaminate and
Mhm.
thus create a potential harm for consumers could destroy like the amount of lighting or the chemicals that are added to that and ruin crops. Let's talk about these threats with technology, with data and cyber. There's a lot of questions as you saw from the students. Um,
Mhm.
um, have you, as a CEO, is this a concern of yours? Do you have meetings about this? Do you have people? One of the questions was, do you have a chief information security officer or similar? Let's talk about that. What are you doing to safeguard your company in the face of this threat?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. And that is something that honestly a lot of growers get concerned about as well. I just met with a grower today who they said that, one of their concerns that they don't put things on a cloud and they have an old information system to track everything is again, they don't want there any data breaches, right? So that is a concern of growers, and they hold on to their data like very close to their heart. They really try not to give it out as much as possible. The data that we collect is essentially from their samples, and it's helping us grow our pathogen database. We currently have a server that we use individually, so it's not put onto a cloud. So there is a home, like a base server. Obviously, that is something that we've thought about, but not enough to a point where I also don't think that we have enough client data, but I mean, it's definitely something we should think about as we continue to scale on how we're going to approach that. Especially as we're thinking about collecting more data from growers in terms of environmental data as well, because that's going to have to be uploaded onto a cloud somewhere. And obviously that has a higher chance of cybersecurity attacks. But again, it's not something that we've thought excessively of as of yet, but again, something that we need to definitely put to the forefront as well, because it is also a concern to growers and they're very aware of that as well.
I don't want to hog all the questions here, especially around technology and cybersecurity. What are some questions that the students might have at this point? We had some really good questions from the students in the discussion boards already. Anyone have a question on this topic with technology and cybersecurity? Help me out, guys. Help me out.
I can ask one, unless you want,
Hey,
I did.
thank you, my
Yeah.
number one student of the hour.
unless you want it typed. No, no, I was just curious, since you'd mentioned, cyber security resiliency within your company, it's something you're kind of having to think about ahead. But you do have customer data now. And I was thinking more about
Yes.
your company and its like the secret sauce that makes you what you are and makes you unique in your company is all held within, your meeting notes, minutes, and your administrative information, and your
Fine.
employee information and their skills, their abilities, their knowledge. All of those things are their assets. and whether it be proprietary technology that you have or your intellectual property, all of that is, to me, that's information that should be in your vault, of so to speak. So how do you ensure, or do you have discussions about how do you protect this information, and what are your employees getting educated on kind of cyber, what do you call it? I guess cyber, are they being given cyber tools to behaviors to combat potential breaches through like an email compromise or social engineering and things like that that may come from either a nation state actor or even a criminal just looking to extract money from you?
That is a great question. I will be honest, that's not something that we had even thought about, is like our personal information that could be like subject to attacks as well. Obviously we don't, so the IP that we have is not, it's just the database, which is all put on a server. Like I mentioned, that's like, and it's not a cloud server or anything. So that is one way that we're protecting that database, because it's not available. Well, it's just a lower risk of there being a cyber attack to that. But that's definitely not something that we had thought about at all, was just personal information as well being attacked. And I'd love to hear suggestions on like how you guys would approach it as well then.
So I'd have one follow-up question. Do you have a backup to that server if it were to be wiped or compromised or lost? And what kind of damage would that do to your company? Could you get back up and running quickly, or would that be devastating?
So our bioinformatician also keeps our director of bioinformatics, he keeps a copy on his personal laptop as well, of it. So that's good. So I mean, unless both are compromised, then we'd be in big trouble.
Good point. Good point. Recently there was news about how a major pharmacy company, would ended up paying, like, I think it was $21 million in ransom, cyber ransomware to get their access and information back. If you had to, even in Canadian dollars, if you had to pay $20 million because you were attacked, is that something that would be very problematic for your company?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. We're not a big company. Like, so I don't think that's even something that we could afford at this point, to pay $20 million. I think we might be better off starting from scratch again. So I think it really depends on like how big the company is as well. That's like something you have to consider too. Yeah.
Are there other challenges? This is a great question. I don't know who asked this, but beyond the cybersecurity, are there other challenges that you guys have faced that you see either you have or you could use data and technology to overcome?
Yeah. So one challenge that we do face as well is, as a lab, you have to think about, so usually growers, when you're talking about turnaround times on results, they will tell you we want it like within the hour, which is impossible if you're a lab and they're sending you samples. That's just not happening, right? The shortest we can do is 2 days. So from what they want to what they're getting, which 2 days is still like the fastest available for like comparing to a lot of other labs, is how can we improve that? And the only way that I see that we can improve that is through the adoption of technology. So my plan for the future really is to try to adopt different types of sensors as well and create predictive modeling for how climate actually affects growth of different pathogens. And that would allow for like an on-site testing method, essentially, or an early warning signal for growers, which will give them that, turnaround time that they need of like, okay, it's constantly checking and it's also signaling like, oh, these conditions are ideal for this pathogen. So maybe at that point, they know that they need to do something, or that there is a possibility that this will occur. So I think that in that sense, technology will really help our company to continue to grow and meet the requirements that growers have as well.
I would imagine though that that kind of predictive analytics would require, though it could result in some more real time and even, preventative mitigation, right? That
Mhm.
there you can see the better value of the technology, but you just can't flip the switch. You've got to do calibration, you got to do adjustments, you've got to
No.
do a lot of
Yeah,
work to get that in. So there would be a lot of
exactly.
challenges to pull that off.
Oh yeah, it's gonna take so long, I think, to get there eventually. And then the first challenge that we face just to try to get there is getting data from the growers. So getting environmental data, like I mentioned, growers hold their data close to their heart and they don't want to let it go. So that's already the first challenge, right? We have started working with some growers uh, to already get that data, but yeah, that's the first challenge that I see is how can we work with more growers to get that data? Because the only way that we're going to be able to build that is if we have lots and lots of data, because that's how we built our pathogen database is we had a lot of data to build that. So you have to do that like all over again, but now with environmental factors as well.
Right. Any other questions from all of our participants around technology, cybersecurity, data? Oh, Sarah, I saw a hand up.
Yeah. Hello. Thank you. This is fascinating. So when you have when you notice a pathogen, what is
Yeah.
the next step? Like, oh my gosh, there's this thing growing in the system. How do we get it out? Or like, do you have to like purge the system, or what goes on
No.
in that
So
kind
a
of
lot of times
situation?
there are Yeah, a lot of times there are things you can do without purging everything because otherwise that would be a huge loss for the growers, right? So there are things like vaccines as well for certain viruses. There are like antifungal treatments. There's lots of stuff out there that can help combat a lot of pathogen issues. But the reason that you want to test is because you need to know what the issue is before you're just throwing a bunch of stuff at it, right? So that's a big issue amongst growers is that a lot of times they're using more inputs than are necessary, or they're wasting money because they're using like an Advil for something that Advil won't work on essentially. So you need more targeted pest management strategies, and to get that, you have to do testing. So a lot of times what growers will now do is do routine testing and then, work on getting a problem under control. Because it's also not an easy fix. It's not like you just apply one thing to a plant and it's going to fix it. It really depends on what the problem is, how the solution actually works. And there's crop consultants that also work with these growers to try to come up with better solutions as well. But yeah, it's not always like a get rid of all of it. But in some cases, it actually is. A big virus that's been affecting a lot of greenhouses is tomato greenhouses is Rugose virus. And for that, especially the last 2 years, a lot of growers have had massive losses. They're actually switching their crops now. So, because of that virus. So yeah, but not all hope is lost sometimes.
Well, it sounds like we're in a good, I'm sorry, were there any questions around technology and cybersecurity from students? Well, it sounds like we're in a good place to kind of pivot to, there was a good amount of questions about food security and insecurity, green revolution. Um, uh, let's talk about some of these issues. It would seem to me like you're talking about you don't want to get to a point where you have to get rid of, purge an entire crop or something like that. You don't want to do something where you're creating a negative impact on the environment and obviously on society. So what, like some of the questions here, looking at green revolution and food insecurity, where do you see your company and even hydroponics in general, where does it sit within these realms?
Yeah, I mean, I think that hydroponic farming in general is a great way to help combat some of these food security issues because with traditional farming, there's so many issues also associated with it. One of them is like uh, essentially over farming the soil. So it depletes soil health as well, right? So you can't grow crops there anymore. It's takes up a lot of land as well, which vertical farming can help combat. The other thing, again, that I mentioned is that hydroponic farming, you can grow year round. So that really helps in the sense that, you know, you're producing more food for a growing population. And then the other thing is that when you're doing indoor farming, for the most part, you're able to grow food more locally. So we're seeing this in northern Ontario, for example, where there is, especially in Indigenous communities, they have massive food shortages. They have their grocery prices are so expensive because it's hard to get food up there. But what we've seen in the last like year or two is that they're starting these smaller container farms, which is able to supply food for the community itself, right? So it's helping combat food security in the sense that they don't have to get food from far away anymore, right? It doesn't have to be as expensive as it is if they can grow it themselves. So I think that hydroponics really plays a big role in that, is combating that food security issue, making sure that food is grown more locally, and also in areas where there's climate change, where you have soil that's not healthy anymore, right? It can help combat those issues. Of course, not all crops can be grown hydroponically, but this allows for more soil to be used to grow other types of crops like wheat, soybeans, you know, the big cash crops as well, in that sense. And I mean, in terms of improving hydroponic farming as well, I think a big thing that's going to play a role as we go forward is the adoption of precision technologies. So precision technologies would be like, essentially just selecting for the right thing. So like I mentioned, when you're coming up with solutions on if there's a problem in your greenhouse, maybe figuring out a technology that'll help you find the best fertilizer to use, or the best fungicide to use, right? That'll work best for your crop. So precision technologies and AI will play a big role in the coming years to help improve hydroponic farming as well.
It seems like, so many times, at least I hope I'm not alone in this. Well, this is not the way we've been doing it forever. We've always been doing it this way, or it was always fine when we did it this way. Okay, but that's great. But we have so many different variables today. And when
Yeah.
you look at some of the issues that are going on right now, even since we started this class, I meant to bring this up. I have been on the phone so many times with reporters talking about the bird flu and talking about the impact of the avian flu, the H5N1, on dairy milk, dairy cows, raw unpasteurized milk versus pasteurized milk, chicken, beef. And one of the things that people understand is that, well, it doesn't sound like the risk is any greater to humans. Okay, but if we break down risk in terms of likelihood and severity, whereas the severity might not have changed in terms of the impact on humans, the severity is changing with all these different factors in terms of all these different species of animals. And the likelihood of us being impacted economically is starting to grow, because now we're looking at, okay, we have to get rid of this, we have to get rid of this milk, we have to get rid of this, I mean, I don't know if people know this, but millions of chickens are killed during these outbreaks. Like the last big outbreak, there was like 26 million chickens killed. They call it culled, or my favorite word, depopulated. The only thing they could do is kill an entire flock. And then you wonder why our prices go up. And you wonder why our availability becomes sporadic. And the same thing, you look at the idea of what hydroponics can do. Because is there any students who remembers like 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, always around Thanksgiving, there were those outbreaks and recalls with leafy greens and romaine lettuce? Anyone remember that? It was always around Thanksgiving there for a while. And it was because it was contaminated irrigation water and soil in the Yuma, Arizona, because it was downstream of the cattle operations. And so they were recalling all this lettuce because it was contaminated with E. coli. You know what lettuce was not contaminated, or what lettuce was not recalled, however? Leafy
Starts with an
greens,
H.
lettuce. I'm sorry?
Starts was it hydroponic lettuce, I'm
Yeah,
guessing?
hydroponics, container
Mhm.
farms,
Yeah.
indoor ag, any of those greenhouse grown, none of those were recalled because they weren't exposed to the same water and soil impacts of the environment. And that's one of the biggest advantages of indoor ag. But at the same time, like you're talking about, if you start talking about precision agriculture and the data and the technology used to do that, you're just opening yourself up for, you know, the weaknesses that can happen in terms of cybersecurity resilience. A lot of things to look at there. Um, what are some other questions we had? There was a question about corporate social responsibility, and I actually thought this was a really interesting thing that was, I don't know who brought it up. You were talking about the testing and the regular testing and that they want testing faster. Do you think that it is a corporate social responsibility to be doing this type of testing that they do with your company?
Oh, I wish that it was like a mandate essentially to be doing testing that often. Only because it not only I think growers are now coming around to it. Like if we're talking about corporate in terms of like the corp like commercial greenhouses, correct?
Correct.
Or like corporate as in the labs. Yeah, so for commercial greenhouses, I mean, there is certain testing they do have to do. So that would be food security testing, food safety. So Salmonella, E. coli, Listeria, those have to be tested for. That's like the government, you have to do it. Um, but then the test that they don't have to do is pathogen tests. Now, a lot of times they don't do it because they're thinking they're going to save some money. Obviously, I think that is going to play a big role as we go forward as well, is because greenhouses are losing money essentially, or all growers, honestly, because production costs have increased so much. But the benefit of doing that routine testing, and we're seeing it now with some of the growers that we work with, is that they're actually saving more.
I think.
There we go.
Hey,
We're back. I think my internet just cut off there.
we hear it's. I'm not alone, right? Everyone sees and hears Tanya. All right, good. All right, so you talk about economics. It's costing more. We were talking about corporate social responsibility, and it's
Yes,
costing more to do this. The pathogen
yes.
testing.
Well, not just the pathogen testing, like production costs in general have gone up, and that puts a strain on the growers to do that routine testing. But um, it should be something that they do just because it'll help them save money in the long run. So, I completely understand because the production costs are so high, they try to save wherever they can. But the thing is that in the long run, I think their vision is they have more short-term vision, right? Because they're like, I just need to make it to next year. And that ends up being a struggle. But I think in the long run, it would really help because you're reducing the amount of input you're using, you're reducing the amount of risk that you're opening yourself up to in terms of diseases as well, right? Or different virus outbreaks, and crop losses too. So yeah, I mean, it's something that I definitely wish and I hope and I think in the future we will get there. It's just right now, I think a lot of greenhouses there especially in the last 2 years, they've been running low on funds because production costs have been so high. And, you know, I'm hoping that production costs will hopefully decrease a little bit. But we'll see where the future goes in terms of that, because electricity also as electricity, heat, all of that has gotten very expensive for greenhouse growers in the last year. So yeah, that's definitely putting a strain on what extra funds they have to do testing as well.
Well, before I turn over to the students, I want to pivot on something you said, that idea of the cost of doing like additional testing. So there's the cost of doing something, but what we don't often hear taken into consideration is the cost of doing nothing. And when you look at the short
Mhm.
term versus the long term output or aspect, you got to take that in consideration. I was mentioning somewhere in this hour that one of the major pharmacy companies ended up paying $21 million to CyberHack. I would imagine that, if they had just spent $100,000 a year, more to make them more safer, right? Someone probably said, we're not going to put $100,000 into something that we don't know it's going to happen. I bet you when they look at paying $20 million, there's someone going, yeah, we should have taken window or curtain A and paid the $100,000 a year, and then we wouldn't be paying $20 million a year, $20 million for this incident right here, kind of a deal. So whether it's testing like you're talking about or cybersecurity, the idea of the prevention and being more resilient is definitely an issue here. What is this? They don't even use multi-factor identification measures. Yeah, there's so many companies that I have to admit, I know like within the medical field in the United States, there's HIPAA, and within the um, uh, academic, there's FERPA, and I think it's crazy how for me to get into my classes and to do these different things, I have to do second party or I have to do 2-factor or 3-factor authentication on my phone, and it's like, oh, I got to do this, I got to hit this, and I got to hit accept. Yes, I'm me. Look, I'm me. Kind of a thing. And yet there's companies out there that don't even do anything like that at all. So kind of what's seen as an inconvenience sometimes is literally a lifesaver in other conditions. Let's open up to the students. What are some questions? We've talked about technology. We've talked about green revolution, environment. We've talked about so many different things here. But what are we missing? What question is burning in your mind?
Maybe
While you're
Megan,
thinking
if
about
nobody
questions,
else has a question.
who does?
Does anybody else have a question? No? Okay. I have another question then, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so I looked at the company's website and you were using qPCR testing. Do
Yeah.
you like, and obviously with COVID, we had polymerase chain reaction testing as well.
Yeah.
Do you foresee the health industry so the way that the health industry tests things, do you see that it's also helpful for your industry as well? Like, because I
Yeah.
guess they both have DNA, right? Like both,
Yes.
like
Yeah.
things that are in the health and in the plants.
Yes, that's exactly it. So the way that we test is the same way. So like for Brugos, you were testing for RNA. That's the exact same thing that we're doing with the viruses that we test for as well. We use qPCR, we use RNA to test for Brugos, for cucumber viruses, for Pepino mosaic virus, right? So we do use RNA. It's the same techniques really, but it's just applied to agriculture instead of human health. Yeah. Same thing with the sequencing testing. It's, sequencing testing is used for a bunch of different things. We just apply it to agriculture. That's all it is. Yeah.
Very cool. And I'm glad you brought that up because in my work that I've been doing over the last 3 decades, I've seen pulse field uh, and whole genome sequence and so many different difference of testing. And one of the things that we end up talking about a great deal is that though you have these great innovations and you can do things faster or they can do it deeper, um, there are whole outbreaks we thought were all the same. Like there's this big salmonella outbreak, right? And then this new technology with whole genome sequencing goes, and like you're talking about DNA. Oh, no, actually, this salmonella outbreak is different than this salmonella outbreak.
Yeah.
They're not all one big salmonella outbreak.
Yeah.
But there's a cautionary note that's always included in terms of the fact that, yeah, but the problem is we cannot use this in a court of law because it would be impossible to explain this to a jury to have them understand this kind of a
Yeah.
thing. And you have to think about that in terms of what is the purpose of it? Is the purpose of the technology to be able to penalize people, or to hold people accountable, or to help people be proactive, kind of a deal? And sometimes, you say, oh, well, we can do this, you know, um, you know, kind of like the DNA, like if you watch CSI shows, oh, the DNA is there, kind of thing. Yeah, the DNA is only as good as you can explain it to a jury in a courtroom, kind
Yeah.
of a deal. So the irony is that you can collect all this data and you can have all this technology, but if the people you're working with don't understand how to interpret
Don't
it,
understand.
yeah, it's like you have data, but you have to turn it into actionable information. And
Yeah.
if you have actionable information, you have to have people that then take that information and actually act upon it. Um, have you run into that where you've given companies back, here's the information
Yeah.
you want, and you're like, yeah, I don't know if they're actually going to act on it?
So that's exactly why we developed our growers portal. As I mentioned at the beginning, we were doing paper reports before. So when we first came out with the data, growers did not understand. They're like, what does this even mean? So we worked with them to make it in a way where they can understand it and they can, take action based on what they've learned now. So that's why we developed the portal. We developed ways of essentially displaying data in a way that makes sense to them. And that's really important when you're working in any type of data field, is like, as you mentioned, like you need to make sure whoever you're working with understands. Otherwise it's useless information.
Great point. All right. Well, I know we're at the top of the hour. I want to give students, if there's any last question from students, no pressure, but now is the time. All right. Well, hey, first off, students, thanks for joining us. And again, if you're watching this live or recording of it, please share some of your ahas, a big takeaway, something you learned from our guest here about the topic and about her career in the discussion boards. I know that I had got a couple questions from students. Wait, it says it's this week's assignment, but it's actually due next week. I know I messed that up. I should have put in next week, but hey, it doesn't hurt for you to get a start on the assignment where you're defining all those terms. It's due, correct me if I'm wrong, I want to say May 12th, even though it's in this module, which makes it sound like it's due this Sunday. It's due next Sunday. That's all good there. Tanya Irani, thank you very, very much. I know that, this is a growing field, and um, uh, I would imagine that in your career, you're going to see technologies emerge and become mainstream that weren't even thought about when you started your career. I really do think that as much as we can fear about climate change and food sustainability, food accessibility, food security, things of those issues, um, it's not the answer that we have enough food. I think the answer is that with the technologies, if we can use it right, we can make sure that we're not wasting our food, or we're not causing our food to become inconsumable, if that's a word, because we're not testing for these things. We're not taking proactive measures and making sure that it is safe, it's protected, it's resilient. And I have to admit, I have talked for so many years now about food's journey. I think that data's journey could be seen as being very similar. We can talk
Yeah.
about food quality, food security, food safety. We can talk about data quality, data security, data safety, data authenticity, just as much as we could talk about food. So I think there's some interesting parallels here.
Yeah, I agree. And thank you guys so much. I really appreciated being able to be a part of this.
Great. Well, Tanya Irani, thank you very, very much. And everyone else, we're going to meet again next week on Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And we're going to really get deep into cybersecurity. This will probably be the deepest we get with any of our guest speakers into cybersecurity, with Stuart King from Europe, from England, somewhere in there, who is actually now Kristen. I didn't realize she was going to say, "Oh, I'm related to him," or I'm engaged, to him, kind of thing. But it all works. So now we know more about our sponsor. Anyway, everyone, thank you very much. Always feel free to reach out if you have any questions, challenges, obstacles. things in your way, I'm here to help. And it's really good to be back. And we'll be around this week and next week, and we'll see you next week.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Thanks.